Today, I'm going to show you how to turn the default cube into this cute little fella. This is a Muggo. Muggos are little critters I like to make to practice basic modeling and extremely simplistic character design. And I think they'll make a great exercise for beginners. In this series, we'll cover basic modeling, basic materials, and a simple render setup so that you can start making little Muggos of your own. So, let's get started. Modeling! For once, we're actually going to start with the default cube. And weirdly enough, the first thing I'm going to do to the cube is to turn it into a sphere by hitting Ctrl and 3 to add a subdivision surface modifier with 3 subdivisions to my cube. Why not just use a sphere, you ask? You'll see why in just a minute. I promise it'll make sense shortly. Next, I'm going to scale up my round shape a bit, and then I'll hold tab and select edit mode so that I can make some changes to its shape. If holding tab doesn't bring up this pie menu for you, just go to edit, preferences, key map, and make sure that tab for pie menu is checked. Then it'll work. It's a small thing, but it saves a lot of time. Now that I'm in edit mode, I'll make sure I'm in face select mode by clicking on this button up here or hitting 3 on the QWERTY part of my keyboard, not my numpad. Then I'll select the top face and hit S to scale it down a bit. I'll make sure I'm on the modifiers tab and then increase the subdivisions to 4. I want to make the bottom of my shape a little more square, so I'll select the bottom face and hit Shift E, then move my mouse to make it more square. Notice that as I move my mouse, the edge colors are changing to a more purplish color. This is called creasing, and it's invaluable for modeling. It lets you determine how hard or soft an edge should be on objects with subdivisions. To make my ship a little taller, I'll select the top face, hit G to grab it, then Z so that I move it in the Z direction, which is up and down. That seems good. I'll hit tab and go back into object mode, then I'll hit 1 on my numpad to go into front orthographic view. I want to add the eyeballs now, so I'll hit Shift A to open the add menu, navigate to mesh, and select the UV sphere. It's hidden inside the first shape, as you can see from the outline. I want to move it to the front of my shape, so I'll hit 3 on my numpad to go into right orthographic view. Then I'll hit G to grab, and then move it to the left. I'll hit 1 on my numpad again to go back into front orthographic view, then hit S to scale the eyeball, followed by G to move it into roughly the right place. It's important that I do this in orthographic view because it ensures that I can only move in 2 dimensions, left to right or up and down. If I were to try grabbing it and moving this eyeball in the regular perspective view, it would make it a lot harder to place it quickly. Let's go back into edit mode so we can see why we wanted the UV sphere. Notice that at the top of the sphere, there are a bunch of concentric circles. We can use these to easily create the iris and pupil of our eye. But first, we need to have the top of the sphere facing forward, so we'll go back into object mode, select our sphere and hit R to rotate, followed by X to rotate it on the X-axis, then 9 and 0 to rotate it 90 degrees. R, X, 90. Now the part of the sphere with the circles is looking straight forward. I'll hit 7 on my numpad to go into top orthographic view, then hit G to grab and move the sphere closer towards the body. I'd like for there to be 2 eyes, so I'll go into the modifiers tab and search for mirror. Select it, then navigate to the object option here, click the dropper icon, then select the original shape we made. This will make it so that the eyeballs are mirrored relative to that shape. To get my body shape to be smooth, I'll need to apply the subdivision modifier. The old shade smooth option is gone in Blender 4.1, but since I'm done editing the basic shape of the body, it's fine to apply the modifier. I'll then select shade smooth by angle and uncheck keep sharp edges. Now my fella is nice and smooth. I'll tweak the eyes a bit for now, and I'll make lots of little tweaks as we go on. Next, I want to add the legs. So I'll hit Shift A to open the add menu, navigate to mesh, and select the cube. I'll hit G followed by Z to move the cube down below the body. I'll hit Ctrl 4 to give my cube 4 levels of subdivision, making it nice and smooth. I'll hold tab and go back into edit mode, hit S followed by Z to scale my leg vertically. Then just as before, I'll make sure I'm in face select mode, and I'll select the bottom face and scale it down a little. I'll hit Shift E to crease the bottom of the leg and make it just a tiny bit more square. I'll tab back into object mode, hit G to move my leg down a little so I can see what I'm doing, then tab back into edit mode and crease the top of the leg a little as well. I'll tab back into object mode, then press S to scale down my leg, followed by G to grab it and move it into position. Just like before, I'll go to the modifiers tab, apply the subdivision modifier using the drop-down menu, then add a mirror modifier, and I'll select the body as the mirror object. And then I'll select my leg, right-click and set shade smooth by angle to get a nice smooth result. Alright, I'm fairly happy with the base of my little Muggo, so I'll hold Z to bring up the viewport shading pie menu and select material preview, because it's time for materials. To add materials, let's navigate to the materials tab. Click on the plus button to create a new material slot, then click on the button marked new to fill the slot with a new material. I'll double click the material name to rename it and call it body. I'll then go to the base color selector and choose a yellow orangish color, then crank the roughness all the way up. Then I'll select the legs, go to the material selector drop down, and choose body from the list to apply the same material to the legs. Next, I'll select the eyes and follow the same steps to create a new material. Hit the plus button for a new slot, click the new button to fill that slot, then double click to give it a name. I'll call this one eyes, then I'll create 2 more materials the exact same way, a blue one for the iris and a black one for the pupils. Next, I'll tab into edit mode so we can start to apply these materials. To make a bunch of fairly precise selections quickly, we can hit C in edit mode to enable circle select, which looks like this. We can use circle select to quickly select the faces of the sphere that we want for our pupil by left clicking and dragging it around. But unlike the regular selection tool, you need to right click to finish making a selection with the circle select tool. If you don't right click, the tool will remain active and you won't be able to do anything else. So hit C, make your selection, then right click to confirm that selection, and once you right click to confirm, the regular selection mode will be active again. Now that I've selected some faces on my sphere, I'll go over to the materials list and select pupil from the list. Then I'll hit assign to apply that material to the selected faces. As you can see, once I hit assign, the faces turn black, just like my pupil material. Now I want to make a selection for the iris, so I'll zoom in a bit. Then I'll aim my cursor to the right side of any face immediately outside the pupil, like here. I'll hold Shift, Alt, and left click to select the entire band of faces surrounding the pupil, then go to the materials list, choose iris, and click assign. Now we have an iris. And since I want my eyes to appear shiny, I'll turn the roughness down on each of these materials until I'm happy with how shiny they look. I'm happy to have them be really shiny, so this looks good. I want to give this Muggo a coat, and now's a good opportunity to explain why I wanted a round cube instead of an actual sphere. If I select the body and tab into edit mode, you'll notice the thicker line here near the bottom. I want to use that line to help me make the shape of the coat, and a regular UV sphere wouldn't have that line there. We're going to use the geometry that's already here as a base to make our coat. To do that, I'll hit 1 on my numpad to go into front orthographic view, make sure I'm on face select mode up here, then hold Z to bring up the viewport shading pie menu and select wireframe. This will let me see all the way through my object, which is handy when you want to make a selection that goes all the way around. Since I want to follow a curve with my selection, I'll go over to the selection tool, then click on it and hold it until I see this pop up. I'll choose select lasso from that list, then I'll carefully trace the outline of the coat on my Muggo. If you miss some faces, it's better to change your viewport shading to solid or material preview in order to select them, because making selections in wireframe shading will go all the way through the object, like this. So I'll hold Z to switch to solid viewport shading and then finish making my selections for the shape of the coat. Then I'll hit 1 on my numpad for front orthographic view, I'll hold Shift and click on the faces I want to deselect. I want the front of my Muggo's coat to be open, so I'll deselect these faces in the front symmetrically. Once I'm happy with the shape of the coat, I'll hit Shift D to drag my mouse away to duplicate the selected faces, then hit Escape to have the duplicate faces return to their original position. Then I'll hit P to bring up the separation dialog, and I'll choose Selection. This option will make a new object out of any selected faces, and now that I've separated them, I have a perfectly sized coat from my Muggo. I'll tab back into Object mode, and as you can see from the orange outline, there's a new object there. I'll go to the Modifiers tab, then I'll click on the body and hit H to hide it from view. Now I can see the shape of my coat, and I'll rename it, and the eyes also. I'll unhide the body by hitting Alt-H, then I'll go over to the Modifiers tab, select Add Modifier, and search for Solidify. Then I'll go to the Thickness slider and move it to the left until I'm happy with the thickness of the coat. That looks good. I want my coat to be a brown color, so I'll go to the Materials tab, hit the minus button to remove the body material from the list, then hit the plus button to create a new material slot, and then the new button to create a new material, and I'll call it Coat. I'll then choose a nice brown color and increase the roughness so it's a lot more matte. I'll go back to the Modifiers tab and apply the Solidify modifier. Then, to smooth the coat out, I'll add a new modifier, search for Subdivision Surface, and set the subdivisions to 4. Now I want to add some eyelids, so I'll select the eyes and hit Shift D to duplicate them, followed by Escape to have them return to their original position. Since these duplicate eyes are in the exact same spot as the original eyes, we can just hit S to scale them up a little and have them be eyelids. To better see what I'm doing, I'll go into the Materials tab and remove all of the materials by hitting the minus button until they're all gone. Then I'll go to the Material Selector dropdown and choose Body from the list. Next, I'll tab into Edit mode, hit A to select all, then just like before, I'll hit R, X, 90 to rotate the sphere 90 degrees on the X-axis. I'm rotating it back so that I can get a clean cut across the nice flat lines in the middle here. I'll hit 1 on my numpad to go into front orthographic view, hold Z to switch my viewport shading to wireframe, make sure I'm on face select mode, and change my selection tool back to the select box. Next, I'll select the bottom half of the sphere, like so, then hit X to bring up the deletion menu and select faces. I'll tab back into object mode, then hold Z to switch shading to material preview. Now we have some eyelids. Because the eyelids are in the same spot as the eyes, we can also rotate the eyelids to help us make expressions. So I'll hit 3 on my numpad to go to right orthographic view, then hit R to rotate and move my mouse until the eyes are open a little wider. The eyelids don't yet have any thickness, so just like the coat, I'll give the eyelids a name, and then I'll go to the Modifiers tab, search for and select Solidify. I'll move the Solidify modifier up in the stack by dragging on this grip here. That way the Solidify will work properly when applied. Sometimes the order of modifiers matters, as you'll see in a second. I'll adjust the thickness of the eyelids until I'm happy. Then I'll apply the modifier from the drop-down menu. To smooth the eyelids out, I'll add a subdivision surface modifier just like before, but notice that when I apply it, I get this error here. That's because the subdivision modifier wasn't the first in the stack. Like I said before, sometimes the order matters. For now, the eyelids look fine though, so let's move on. I'd like my Muggo to be a little derpy, so I'll select his eyes, hit R to rotate, followed by Z to rotate on the Z axis. Then I'll move my mouse until the eyes derp a little. Nothing major, just a wee bit of derp. Then I'll select the eyes and the eyelids and adjust them by hitting S to scale and G to grab and move. Now it's time for the hat. To make the hat, I'll hit Shift A to bring up the Add menu, navigate to Mesh, then select the cylinder. I'll hit G to grab it and move it to the right of my Muggo. I'll tab into Edit mode, make sure I'm on Face Select mode, then select the bottom face, hit X to bring up the deletion menu, and select Faces to delete it. I want to add a little fabric band around the hat, so I'll switch to Edge Select mode by hitting 2 on my keyboard, or selecting this button, then hover over the cylinder and press Ctrl R to add some loop cuts. I can change the number of loop cuts by scrolling my mouse wheel up or down after hitting Ctrl R. So I'll scroll until there are 2 loop cuts, and I'll place them where I want the fabric band to go. Then, to make the brim of the hat, I'll hover over the bottom circle of the cylinder, hold Shift and Alt together, and then left click to select the entire edge loop. Once selected, I'll hit E to extrude this edge, followed immediately by S to scale. So E, S, and move my mouse to scale, and you'll see the brim pop out. I'll switch to face select mode by hitting 3 on my keyboard, select the top face, and scale it up a little bit. Then, I'll hover near the right side of one of the faces on my fabric band, and once again hold Shift Alt and left click to select all the way around the band. I'll then hit Alt E to bring up the extrusion dialog, and select Extrude Faces along normals. This will extrude my selected faces evenly and directly outwards, which is exactly what I want. I'll hit 2 on my keyboard to switch to edge select mode, hit Ctrl R to add one more loop cut near the top of the hat, then hit S to scale it up just a little. Finally, I'll select the edge loop on the brim of the hat by hitting Shift Alt and left clicking. Then I'll hit E to extrude and drag my mouse downward. If this blue line doesn't appear when you hit E to extrude, just hit Z immediately afterwards to extrude along the Z axis. And there we go, now we have a hat. I'll tab into object mode, select the hat, then right click and select Shade Smooth by Angle to smooth it out. Then I'll go to the Modifiers tab, and just like before, I'll add a subdivision surface with 3 levels of subdivision. Then I'll go to the Materials tab and select the coat material from the Material Selection dropdown. I want my fabric band to have an accent color, so to add that, I'll tab into Edit mode, make sure I'm on Face Select mode by hitting 3 on my keyboard, then use Shift Alt to select the outside and top faces of the band. In order to select the bottom faces of the band though, I'll hit 1 on my numpad to go into front orthographic view, hold Z to switch my shading to wireframe, then select all of the faces underneath the fabric band. Once selected, I'll hit H to hide them, then hold Z to switch shading back to material preview. Now I have clear access to the bottom faces of the fabric band, so I'll use Shift Alt to select the bottom, outside, and top faces. Once selected, I'll add a new material slot with the plus button, click Assign to apply it to the selected faces, then add a new material, give it a name, and choose the color. Then I'll hit Alt H to unhide the rest of the hat. The edge under the fabric band is a little too smooth for my liking, so I'll hit 2 on my numpad to switch to edge select mode, and then I'll hover over the brim of the hat and hit Ctrl R to add a loop cut. I'll move the loop cut until it's nice and close to the fabric band, which will make the edge much more crisp. Nice. I'll tab back into object mode, hit 1 on my numpad to go into front orthographic view, then select the hat and hit S to scale it down a bit, followed by G to grab it and move it into position. I'll spend a little bit of time moving the hat into position using G to grab and R to rotate until it looks right. Once I'm happy with the position of the hat, I'll make sure it's selected, then hold Tab to switch to sculpt mode. Then I'll hit G to select the grab brush, and I'll just nudge the hat around a little until it looks a bit more frumpled and interesting. You can change the size of the grab brush by hitting F and moving your mouse, and you can also change the strength of the brush by hitting Shift F and moving your mouse. Once I'm happy with how the hat looks, I'll tab back into object mode. Now let's give our Muggo a shirt. To do this, we're going to use the exact same process as we did for the coat. Go into edit mode, make sure you're on face select by hitting 3 on your keyboard, then make a selection that looks like a shirt between the openings in the coat. Hit Shift D to duplicate the selection, followed by escape to bring it back to its original position. Then hit P to bring up the separation options and choose selected. Tab back into object mode, go to the modifiers tab and add a solidify modifier. Then change the thickness to your liking. Then go to the materials tab, hit the minus button to remove the body material. You can add a new material here if you like, but I just left mine blank and white. Go back to the modifiers tab, apply the solidify modifier from the drop-down menu, and add a subdivision surface modifier with 4 levels of subdivision, and apply it from the drop-down menu. Then we'll hold Tab to switch back to sculpt mode, turn on X symmetry by clicking this button up here, then hit G to select the grab brush. We want to pull the collar of the white shirt down a bit to make room for a tie to poke out of the top, and bring up the bottom just a little. To add the tie, I'll tab back into object mode and hit Shift A to bring up the add menu, navigate to mesh, then select UV sphere. To bring my sphere forward, I'll just move my viewport a little to the right, hit G followed by Y to move the sphere on the Y axis, and move it forward. I'll hit 1 on my numpad for front orthographic view, then hit S to scale down the sphere. I'll hit numpad 3 to go to right orthographic view and move the tie closer into position. To squish it flatter, I'll hit S to scale, followed by Y to scale it on the Y axis until it looks right. I'll hit 3 to go into right orthographic view, hit R to rotate the tie just a little bit, and then G to move it into position until it looks right. I'll go to the Materials tab and select the red accent material from the Material Selection dropdown. Then I'll hold Z to switch to Sculpt mode again, make sure that X symmetry is enabled, hit G to select the grab brush, then adjust the shape of the top of the tie. I'll tab back into Object mode and right-click the tie to shade smooth. I'll then duplicate the tie by hitting Shift D, followed by Z to move it downward. I'll hit numpad 3 to go into right orthographic view, then hit S followed by Z to scale the tie vertically. There we go, the little Muggo is starting to look dapper, but now I think he needs a mustache. To add the mustache, I'll hit Shift A to bring up the add menu, navigate to mesh, and choose the cube. I'll move my camera to the right a little bit, hit G, then Y to move the cube forward. Then I'll hit Ctrl 4 to give it 4 levels of subdivision, which I'll apply in the drop-down menu, hit numpad 1 to go into front ortho view, then hit S to scale the mustache down. I'll go to the Materials tab and select the coat material from the Material Selection drop-down to give him a nice brown mustache. Then I'll tab into Sculpt mode, hit numpad 1 for front ortho view, make sure X symmetry is enabled, and hit G to select the grab brush. Then I'll push and pull the mustache around until I like the shape. Once I'm happy, I'll tab back into object mode and hit G to move the mustache into position. Next, I'd like to add a simple patch on the jacket. Using the exact same process as before, I'll go into edit mode, select the shape I want, duplicate it with Shift D followed by escape, hit P, then choose selection. You'll notice that this new duplicate inherited the subdivision surface modifier from the coat. So just add a solidify modifier and use the grip to move it to the top of the stack, then adjust the thickness to your liking. Then go to the material tab and duplicate the coat material by hitting this button here to make an editable duplicate. Let's call the material patch and just make it a tiny bit lighter than the original brown. Nice. Now that our Muggo is done being modeled, we can think about rendering. To get a preview of what our render will look like, hold Z to bring up the shading pie menu and select rendered. This will show us what our scene looks like with lighting effects applied. When you do this, your scene might look different, and that's okay. You can check the viewport shading options to see if scene lights and scene world are enabled. For our purposes, we want them both checked. In case you don't have any lights in your scene, let's quickly add a sun. Hit Shift A to bring up the add menu, navigate to lights, and select sun. Then hit numpad 1 to go into front ortho view, select the sun, and hit G to grab it and move it up and to the right. Then take this little grip dot here and drag it onto your Muggo. Now you have a sun in your scene. In case you don't already have a camera, we'll add one of those as well. Hit Shift A to go to the add menu, navigate to camera, and select it. You'll see your camera appear in the 3D viewport, but it's not in the right spot, so hit G to grab it, then Y to move it to the front of your Muggo. Let's rename the camera to Muggo Cam, then make sure that we make that camera active by clicking on this camera icon. Then, with your mouse over the 3D viewport, hit numpad 0 to go into your camera's view. My camera is off kilter, so to be able to position it easily, I'll hit N to bring up the N panel on the right side, navigate to View, then under the Lock options, select Camera to View. This will lock the camera to your movements in the 3D viewport, making it much easier to get the angle you want. I'll hit N again to close the N panel, then I'll select my Muggo and hit numpad period. This will zoom my camera to the selected object, and since my camera is locked to my view, it'll quickly bring the Muggo into focus. From here, you can move around and find the camera position you like, and once you're happy, hit numpad 0 again to exit the camera view. Next, for our rendering setup, we want to go to the Render Properties tab and make sure our render engine is set to cycles. You can choose between CPU and GPU computation, and GPU is usually faster. These are the settings I've used to set up the render. I'll hold Z to switch back to Material Preview, then I'll box select all the pieces of my Muggo, then hit M to add them to a new collection. I'll call the collection Muggo, then hit OK. This just helps me keep them organized in the outliner. Then, with all of the pieces still selected, I'll hit numpad 1 for front ortho view, then G to grab followed by Z to move on the Z axis, and I'll move the Muggo up until the bottom of its feet are in line with the red X axis. In order to get some nice lighting, I want the Muggo to be standing on a backdrop. To make the backdrop, I'll hit Shift A to open the add menu, navigate to mesh, and select the cube. I'll hit S to scale up the cube until it's fairly large, then I'll go into edit mode, make sure I'm in face select mode, Hit A to select all, then hold Shift to deselect the back and bottom faces. Then hit X to bring up the deletion menu and select faces. You should be left with just these two. I'll tab back into object mode, select my backdrop, hit G followed by Z to move it up on the Z axis until it's in line with the Muggos' feet. I'll tab back into edit mode, then I'll hit 2 on my keyboard, or this button up here, to go into edge select mode, and I'll select the edge in the middle. I'll hit Ctrl B to bevel this edge and scroll my mouse wheel up to give it some more resolution until maybe 4 segments. Then I'll tab back into object mode, right click the backdrop and select shade smooth by angle. I'll select the backdrop and scale it on the X axis by hitting S followed by X and moving my mouse. Then I'll hit numpad 1 for front orthographic view, hit G to grab the backdrop and move it up to the Muggos' feet. Then I'll go to the materials tab, click the plus button to add a new material slot, add a new material, name it backdrop, and pick a color and a roughness that I like. I'll hold Z and switch back to the rendered preview because I want to add some pretty strong top lighting. So I'll hit Shift A, navigate to lights, and choose area. I'll hit G to grab my light, followed by Z to move it up. Then hit S to scale, followed by Y to scale it in the Y direction, like so. Then I'll go to the Data Properties tab, which looks like a light bulb when you have a light selected, and I'll set the power to 300 watts. Next, I'll duplicate this light a few times until the brightness is close to what I want on the Muggo. I'll select all of the new lights and hit M to add them to a group. I'll call it lights and hit OK. Then I'll massage the lights into position and check what my camera sees by hitting numpad 0. It's still very dark, so I'll hit numpad 0 to leave my camera view, then duplicate the left and rightmost lights, pulling them out a bit farther, and adjusting their angle using the grip dot until it looks okay. I want the backdrop to be a little longer on the ground, so I'll select it, tab into edit mode, hit 2 on my keyboard to go into edge select mode, and then select the furthest edge on the ground, and hit G followed by Y to elongate it on the Y axis, like so. Once again, I'll hit numpad 0 to check what my camera sees. And that's looking okay for now. Our Muggo is a business Muggo, so it should probably have a briefcase. We can make a briefcase by using the exact same techniques you learned while modeling the Muggo, and I'll cover this very quickly since we learned about it in the previous 2 segments. First, add a cube, then subdivide it 4 times by hitting Ctrl 4, tab into edit mode, hit Shift A to select all, and then Ctrl E and drag to crease the edges. Go to the Material tab and apply the same brown coat material to the briefcase. Then in Object mode, using Grab, Scale, and Rotate, move the briefcase into position next to the Muggo. For the handle, we can bring in a torus from the Add menu, so hit Shift A, navigate to Mesh, and select Torus. Let's hop into Edit mode because we only need half of it, hold Z to switch to Wireframe Preview, and delete the bottom half. Then back in Object mode, we can grab, scale, and rotate it into position. Then like we did before, we can create a new material, but this time we want the roughness lower and the metallic up a bit so it looks like metal. To get a little panel on top of the briefcase, select the briefcase, hop into edit mode, then select a rectangle from the top faces of the briefcase, hit Shift D to duplicate them and P to separate them. Use the solidify modifier to give it some thickness and apply the metal material to it. Tab back into object mode, select the handle and position it in the center of the panel. Then select the briefcase, panel, and handle together and hit Ctrl J to join them. And that's it. From here on, all I'm doing is tweaking by using all of the techniques we've already covered. I made the lights stronger and moved them around a bit, adjusted the position of the camera, and made minor tweaks to the look of the Muggo. I recommend you play around at this part and see what looks good to you, and when you're finally happy with what you see in your camera preview, hit F12 to render. I really hope this series has helped some of you learn the basics of Blender and how you can model some very simple characters. If you learned something from this video or you like the content, you know what to do. Also, feel free to come hang out on Discord, links in the description. All my love goes to my patrons without whom I could not make these videos. And a huge thanks to the Deuces Club for always sticking around to the end of my videos. If you weren't already in the Deuces Club, you are now. And if you want to join the Deuces Club member list that I pinned to every video, just comment Deuces down below. Alright, that's it for today. I'll be back soon with another vid. Deuces.